Good afternoon to everybody. Could I please ask you to find a seat? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the session where we are going to discuss going global for greater impact. In this session, we are going to discuss international cooperation in research and innovation, and namely how international cooperation can ensure global impact of EU research and innovation programs, and also global impact if we join the forces together. You know that our current research and innovation framework program, Horizon 2020, is open to the world. It is the largest research and innovation program globally, so clearly collaboration within this program is mutually beneficial to all the parties. We are living at a time of change, not only for the Commission, as the new Commission is taking over very soon, but we are also at a time of change where we have digital, climate, ecological, social transformations going on. And it's clear that without the contribution of research and innovation, we will not be able to find the solutions that we are facing as part of these big transformations. You've noticed that the President-elect of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has also unveiled her priorities. And one of these priorities is to make Europe the world's first climate-neutral continent. This is something that actually our people are asking us to do. You've noticed that particularly the young generation is asking us to act now in order to save the world for the future generations. So clearly in this area, the Commission also has to show the leadership. And making this a big priority for the new Commission is actually in line with the request that the citizens are asking us to do. So the European Green Deal will strive to make it happen. In order to make it happen, first we need fundamental research in order to understand climate phenomena, stimulate the development of new solutions, but also combined with applied translational work and innovation in order to create the products and the services that can meet the challenges that will be key impacts on the pillars of Horizon Europe. With Horizon Europe, we aim to be much more impactful, not only scientifically, because scientific impact is the easiest to measure, how many citations, how many articles we produce, but also to have more impact on our economies, more impact on our societies. And clearly, this is something which we cannot achieve alone, but we need our international partners. The Sustainable Development Goals are something that we share globally because they are part of the United Nations priorities. So via international cooperation in science and innovation, we can also contribute to achieving Sustainable Development Goals. So these are the topics that we are going to discuss in this session, and we have an impressive we have impressive speakers in this session who can give their own perspectives. For the time being, we have different means how to collaborate with the EU within the research and innovation program. The closest collaboration is via being associated to our programs. And we have the speakers who come from the countries who are already associated in the current program, from Norway, from Switzerland, from Montenegro. So they can speak from their own experience, what are the benefits. But we also have the speaker who can speak from the perspective from Africa, how actually cooperation with European Research and Innovation Programme can also benefit the collaboration with African continent and with within the particular area. So I hope we really have very interesting discussions within this session. And without further ado, I'd like to pass the word to our panel chair and moderator, Professor Stuart Anderson, who is Deputy Head of the School of Informatics at the University of Edinburgh. So Stuart, now the floor is yours, please.
So the structure roughly is I'll introduce our panelists, and then they'll each make a brief statement, and then we'll take some questions amongst the panel, and then we'll open it up to the chair for everybody else. So I should introduce our panelists now. So this is Michael Makanga, who is Executive Director of the European and Developing Countries Clinical Trials Partnership. And then there's Anita Traseth, who is former CEO of Innovation Norway and now a member of the EIC Council. Sanja Damjanovic, who's Minister of Science in Montenegro, and Matthias Eger, who is chairman of the Swiss National Science Foundation. Yeah, so I think we are now go through each of the panelists giving a presentation. So I think, Michael, if you want to begin. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be here. Briefly about the European and Developing Countries Clinical Trials Partnership. This is one of the pioneering programs that is contributing to the European commitment to tackle global challenges, and in particular, addressing the issue of infectious diseases that involve poverty. Currently, we have a program. This program has been running for the last 16 years, and we are in the 6th year of implementation of the 2nd program. And I have to say that we have broad international cooperation, and this is a European-African cooperation with a global reach. This program is accelerating the development of new and improved medical interventions in the fight against HIV/AIDS, TB, malaria, neglected infectious diseases, those that are on the priority list of WHO, lower respiratory tract infections and diarrhea diseases, and emerging and re-emerging infections of particular relevance to sub-Saharan Africa. But as you see, it is a broad scope of diseases. But one area that the program is really focusing on is really addressing the major medical unmet needs of vulnerable populations. In particular, talking about infants, talking about children, talking about adolescents, pregnant women, individuals that have co-infections and comorbidities that are often excluded when these medical interventions are made available. Currently, we have a program that is involving 226 African institutions collaborating with 139 European institutions and organizations on high-quality research. Looking at our portfolio this morning, I was intrigued to see that more than 30% of the new and improved medical interventions in our pipeline are in the late-stage development. And majority of these are coming from Europe. This is really bringing out the European research area, the innovation that is coming from the region, and the international cooperation. Now, moving on, you'll see that this is an area that requires players from different areas, especially when you're talking about late-stage development. You have a multitude of actors that we have to work with. And in this case, we are tapping in the best brains locally, in Europe, in Africa, and internationally to advance the products. I'll be talking more about this as we go on. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, and now we move on to have Matthias from bringing the perspective of a National Science Council, which is firmly focused on the spread of science across from fundamental science through to application, and also a long associated country to the EU programs. So,
okay, so thanks very much, Stuart. It's fantastic to be here. I've actually sort of got three hats on today. I'm the president of the Swiss National Science Foundation, but I'm also a professor of infectious disease epidemiology, and I'm a father of two girls in Greta's age. So as the second hat, I do a lot of work in Africa, and funded actually by the National Institutes of Health of the USA, but I've also been funded by the Innovative Medicine Initiative of the European Union. As the father of two girls who are big fans of Greta, I spend a lot more time on trains than I used to, which is good. And I intend to intensify that, and I really believe in the missions. Now, as the president of the Swiss National Science Foundation, I'm really a researcher who is heading a foundation which was set up in 1952 by researchers for researchers. So this foundation is very bottom-up and essentially wants to serve the scientific community. And bottom-up in the sense that people come with good ideas, we evaluate their ideas, and we fund or do not fund, but our funding rate is almost 50%, which is one of the features that makes Switzerland attractive as a research ecosystem. Now, the European programs are incredibly important for Switzerland. They mean that Switzerland is even more attractive as a research ecosystem. They mean that the Swiss scientists can compete with the best in Europe, and they basically foster excellence in our ecosystem. We've learned the hard way how important it is to be fully associated. In 2014, and only for 6 months, we were excluded from the European programs. The consequence was that the number of projects that involved Swiss scientists dropped from 4,300 to 300, and we're still catching up. So we're still suffering from that 6 months of exclusion, and we're really very keen on avoiding this in the future and staying fully associated.
Okay, thank you, Matthias. Yeah, the salutary tale of exclusion.
I didn't mention the B word.
Yeah. Okay, now we move on to Anita, who will give us a perspective from the innovation point of view.
Yeah, so I thought that the topic of this event is going global for greater impact. And listening to Trump yesterday at the UN General Assembly, he gave me the opening for this 3 minutes intro, because he said, "The future belongs to patriots, not globalists." I think it's more important than ever that EU is leading the way now and stepping up our global leadership role to ensure the understanding and the importance of why we at this time need global cooperation to solve these common challenges. Because there are powers who are not going to be part of it. That also makes spaces for EU to step up. And so I would say Norway is not a member country, but we are one of 3 countries who are part of the EA agreement. And I would say that this agreement is the cornerstone when it comes to relations between Norway and EU. And we have, by participating, actually have an equal footing as the EU member states since the program was launched already in the mid-80s. I would also say that the EU Framework Program is Norway's most important source to international collaboration in research and development. And I would also say that the development of the program from the FP7 to Horizon 2020, and now we see the new sketch for soon Horizon Europe, it's become even more relevant for larger parts of Europe, specifically the private sector. I would say that the new Horizon Europe, with an ambitious agenda to solve global challenges, with pinpointed 5 missions and a new innovation council, is going to help entrepreneurs, and that's going to be instrumental because it's about creating jobs. It's about creating new industries. It's about using the talents, the young people, to transform the workforce of Europe, and we need that. And I believe that is key, because there will be no successful transformation of any country in the EU if we don't see a larger cooperation between the private and public sector. And in that way, I think our policymakers can make a real difference by nurturing the purchase power that every country in Europe has on the public side, and the ability to use regulations to create new markets. That's why I think Horizon Europe open to the world, that's what they say. It's not an empty slogan. I would say that global collaboration is the fundament to solve our global agenda of tasks, the UN SDGs and the Paris Agreement. And I also think that Europe is now in pole position for change, because we are in the 6th wave of innovation. And Europe has not been better positioned than now, because on the 5th wave, this was typically where the US and Asia, they took a large part of the developing the digital networks and the software information technology. ICT is only one of the key enabling technologies. Now, in the 6th wave, it's all about sustainability. It's about radical resource productivity. It's about green chemistry, industrial ecology, to mention a few. This is spot on for Europe. This is what we can do. Business to business, deep tech and disruptive industrial solutions. I think these are the areas where we can generate the next generation of unicorns. We're not going to create a new Facebook. You know, that must not be a goal. We can create other platforms, more disruptive platforms for the next generation, where there are other values and focus on sustainability. There is a power shift now of making a global impact. So my last note here is that Europe can take on the maillot jaune on the global team. The position is for sure up for grab, if we want it.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. And now we have the final statement from Sanja, who does have, well, we have many people with multiple hats, but also as Minister of Science for Montenegro, and also a long-term scientist using large-scale infrastructures. So,
yeah,
Sanja.
thank you very much, Stuart, for chairing, moderating actually this session. I'm really very happy to be part of this session, and I thank very much organizer for giving me this chance. So I was introduced as Minister of Science of one of the smallest and developing country in Europe. By profession, I'm a scientist myself who spent about 20 years working in the most powerful research infrastructure at CERN. And I want to say that Europe should be proud to have this world center of excellence. So now, coming to to CEN and wider, we are very much aware that real international cooperation, bringing people together, is the best way to accelerate knowledge and innovation. It is the best way to trigger new technologies, and it's the best way to assure better life of our citizens. Now, if you look at CEN, there are about 13,000 users, and there are 120 nations presented in this laboratory. So it's about 3,000 PhD students every year at CEN produce 3,000 PhD theses. The main track is fundamental research, but look what CEN brought to us. It is a lot of side effect in building and in improving technology. The World Wide Web was created there. PET scan was created there. These special grids, which everybody is now using, cloud computer is created there. So Europe should also be very, very happy to have an enormous number of research infrastructure, and DG RTD is behind of that, and thank you very much for it. But now, after 20 years being in such a paradise, and then moving only with, let's say, 2 hours flight from this paradise to the southeast Europe, I would say like that, moving back to Montenegro, I could really feel an enormous gap between this part of Europe, Western Europe, and the rest of Europe, which we call Southeast Europe, which is the large part of Europe with 40 million inhabitants. So I always like to remind people that this part of Europe very much suffer due to the recent history. All scientific, economic activities very much slowed down. As a consequence, this region suffer ever since from the strong brain drain. This is our largest economical loss in our region. But the same region in the past had incredible period of technological development. In that region, there were 3 international institutes, all older than CERN. These are Vinča, Ruđer Bošković, Josef Stefan Institute, probably you heard about that. Yugoslavia at that time was the founder of CERN, 1954, when, for example, Austria was not founder of CERN. Another example I want to tell you, for example, the first research nuclear reactor started to operate there only 2 years later than first research nuclear reactor started to operate in Germany. But now the question is what to do with this gap. So the part of the Southeast Europe are also Western Balkan countries. You heard about these 6 Western Balkan countries. But now, if we would not be associated to EU programs, we would really, every year, this gap will go larger and larger. 2 days later, 2 days ago, we had a ministerial conference on the level of Western Balkan chaired by our Commissioner Moedas, and Senior can also report to that how much improvement was in our national innovative ecosystem just because being associated to EU programs using all kinds of instruments like smart specialization strategy and so on and so on. This helped us to keep this gap, but now the question is how to decrease this gap and how really to return tradition in technology which we had. How to slow down brain drain or revert it, which is our big goal. Now, the only way to do that, and I say most effective way, but I say I need to strengthen its only way, is to create research, big-scale, large-scale research infrastructure which can offer the first-class research to our scientists. Probably you're wondering why I'm here as a Minister of Science, only science from the smallest country, but actually today I'm addressing you not as a Minister of Science, but as a chairperson of Intergovernmental Steering Committee of the large-scale research infrastructure institute, which we call Southeast European International Institute for Sustainable Technologies. 2 years ago, that was just idea. And actually, this idea came from Professor Hedwig Schopper, former Director General of CERN. He is also initiator of another project. It's called Sesame, which was established in Jordan, in the Middle East, which managed to unify 9 countries of different political systems and religions. CERN, up to recently, was the only international institute with a mission, Science of Peace. After that, we got Sesame, which was also very much supported by European Commission, which was the second one. And now, in our region of Southeast Europe, we are building the light. We are building this institute institute, which does not have only objective to promote science, technology, in industry, but also has a special mission to really decrease the tension between the countries in our region. So the mission of our institute is not only science for society, but also science for diplomacy. I know that I took so much time, but I need to say what our institute, which has such a long name, is. The core of the institute is the hadron, cancer therapy, and with heavier ions, with heavier particles, proton and ions, which will also offer incredible important part of the research, cancer research. And at this point, I will stop at this point here, but I'm sure that we will continue a little bit about this important project. Thank you.
Okay, so now to a few questions. So I think we'll start with Michael. And so the body that you work with, the Clinical Trials Partnership, it's a public-public body. Yeah. So and I think for Europe, at any rate, the public sector is such a significant component. Yeah. So how do you feel that international cooperation can play a role with public bodies to achieve the new priorities that we're seeing coming in with the Commission?
Yeah, thank you very much. If I may zero in on the research and development for infectious diseases, this is an area that has little financial appeal to the private sector in terms of returns from the products if they are to be sold, especially to the people that have little resources. And now this calls for increased funding from the public sector. And this is both from the developing and the developed world, so that they all contribute to this. Currently, the major incentive is coming from the public sector. And I see this is making a big difference. Now, moving on, looking forward, the future of research will be shaped by the need for patient-centered care. Now, this calls for looking at the patient as a whole. The integration of infectious and non-infectious diseases, and also the potential for new technologies. This now requires that boost from the private sector. We are seeing this happening in the context of EDCTP, where the European member states and the African member states are working together with funding that is coming from the European Union. And this is incentivizing the public sector to bring funding to the table. And this is what we need to do, especially when we are dealing with very expensive end-to-end product development, especially the late-stage development of products.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question for each of you. So Matthias, how do you feel that the new priorities that are coming in will influence EU science programs, and how will this influence national thinking, do you think?
Okay, thank you for that question. What we really struggle with as a foundation, so we're not part of a ministry, we're really an independent research foundation, which, however, is 200% funded by the state, is how much of our budget should be bottom-up, idea-driven, and how much should be top-down and geared at solving very concrete and urgent questions that society, not only in Switzerland, but globally, is facing. Now, our current solution essentially is that about 80% of our funding is bottom-up. Now, that doesn't mean that this research isn't relevant to addressing these challenges. And about 20% is top-down, is national research programs, for example, on energy storage or antibiotic resistance, or challenges that the society is facing and that are perceived as a high priority. Now, your question is, how is this going to change in the years to come? And the first question is, the first answer is the research community doesn't want it to change. They want to keep it at 80% bottom up. They want to contribute, but they feel that if it's top down, the quality goes down, and it basically forces people to do things perhaps they're not best at, or it basically fosters opportunism more than really going deep and doing what you're good at. On the other hand, we believe at the foundation that we need to do more about impact, and we've designed some measures. So we want to set up funding for so-called implementation networks, where people who have produced relevant results get together with stakeholders from society and investigate how these results could be implemented at large. So this is one initiative. We're also thinking about thematic calls, more thematic calls than we had so far within project funding, broad thematic teams where people still come bottom up, but there is a topic. For example, climate change research is on the agenda. So we're sort of in a process where I do think we will move more of our budget to thematically defined topics, but I also think we'll get some pushback.
Okay, thank you. Yes, inevitably some pushback, I think. So, Anita, I mean, one of your important roles at the moment is on the EIC Council, yeah, and I wondered, what role do you see the EIT and the EIC in stimulating international innovation and international cooperation, or innovation through international cooperation?
Okay. Before I answer that, I'll give you a little preview into our first board meeting yesterday.
Okay.
It was very interesting. We were 22 people from all of Europe gathering in our first meeting. And then the chairman of the board said, you have a license to misbehave. I thought, I'm home. This was so unusual for an EU body to communicate this way. But this group is set together with professors from the Polish Science Academy, with investors, with entrepreneurs, with people from the bureaucracy side, and the chairman of the board sets the tone because he's allowed to do that. So what Moedas have done with forming the European Innovation Council, and also understanding the shift from going, and we will of course continue with a heavy research focus in EU, but also the importance of commercializing and capitalizing on all the money we put in research to build new industries, to build new jobs, to build new competence areas, but also to make EU and cooperation relevant for the next generation. It has to reach out on the premises of the innovators and also the investors. And the innovators are not only scientific people. The innovators are also the 19-year-old in the backyard in the garage. EU is also going to be relevant for them in this new program. So I think that the European Innovation Council and everything that the new Horizon Europe is presenting is a much more diversely oriented. It will of course include a close cooperation with EIT, as you mentioned. They have different roles, but will be closely connected. As EIC focus on the innovators, building growth companies, ensuring capital, what EIT is doing is the important triangle of research, business, and governance and technology. So we need both, and I think the future will probably form out how this is all going to be organized. But the message is clear. EU Commission is in change. And it's in change and on a very good path. And I think it's going to be more relevant for the younger generation, for the private part of it, the private sector. Yeah, so it was, you know, I came back to my colleagues and said, this was actually fun, you know? I got energized by this. And that feeling needs to get out of Brussels. And because magical things are happening here, and these are not my words. These are the physical professor in Poland. He's 72 years old. He said, this happening in EU is magic.
Very good. Okay, so speaking of energy, we're moving on to Sanja now.
Yeah.
I wanted to give you an opportunity maybe to say a little bit more about the role of large-scale international infrastructures, because these things are very long-lived, they need considerable foresight, but they are very instrumental in achieving the priorities. So I wondered if you would want to comment a little bit more on how you see these infrastructures developing that underpin the new priorities.
Okay, so I think in my introduction I already mentioned that this is really need for our region if we want really to solve our problems and to come closer to you. But I just also pointed out that we are for the first time now using instrument of science diplomacy to really achieve this goal. And how can you do that? You can only do that if the science is really based on excellence. So at the beginning, 2 years ago, when we had this idea, we actually did not know what to propose, because you really need to be competitive to the rest of Europe. So we were scanning all kinds of different opportunities, and then we came to this idea of to use really hadron cancer therapy and biomedical research, which I mentioned with protons and heavy ions. But how could we then move further? Because I also said we are weak, we need to build up capacity. We would not move further if we did not get really support from European Commission, DG RTD, and here I really need to mention and personally thank to Commissioner Carlos Moedas, who really trust me and Professor Schopa that we can really can make this move. But then actually today, from one idea of 2 years, today we are now entering into design phase. Now, how could we enter into design phase? Thanks to the first financial support from European Commission. But then that would also not be enough if we did not get open hands from renowned international and national institutes, research infrastructure from Europe. So our project is incubated in the 2 leading institutes at CERN, and CERN is helping us to design the new generation of medical accelerator, and it's also incubated at GSI Institute in Darmstadt, which is probably, I don't know how many people know about that, the first 440 patients were treated with this most powerful method of treatment of cancer, not in hospitals, but in a research institute at GSI. I want also another thing to bring is that in the world, there are only 12 machines of this type. 4 in Europe and 6 in Japan, 1 in South Korea and 1 in China. Everything started in this field, which is very important because it's in line, this mission of cancer is in line, research is in line with new program, Horizon Europe. Everything started at the same time. Europe and Japan were leader, but today Japan took over. Now, it is really unbelievable through our wish to get this infrastructure in our region, and now with CERN and GSI waking up again in this area, now we have really chance to bring back Europe to be leader. And this is what I want to say, it's the beauty of Europe. Cooperation is something which really could really help, if you use in the best way, to get Europe to be leader in the world. And I also now want to say that such big, large-scale infrastructure will immediately trigger a development of the other technology. So for everybody, many people are criticizing large infrastructure because you spend a lot of money for operational costs, you need so much energy, and so on and so on. But this is exactly now the way how we want to develop our country further, to use green infrastructure. Our region of Southeast Europe has 250 sunny days per year. And now if we talk about future of Europe and this use of renewable energy, Europe needs us. Because, I mean, we are really power, and Europe really needs Europe as a whole if we go to move in this direction. So what I want to say is, if we build this larger research infrastructure, we will immediately use development of complementary technology, pushing for green infrastructure, producing energy from the solar source, and on top of that, there is, you know, that medical data, oncological data, big data. So with this, we need digital hub. We will really boost digitalization, which is also needed in our area. So I can see this as a catalyst to develop this part of Europe in many, many directions, and not to talk about the final goal, to build capacity and get people back to our region and be attractive also for Western Europe scientists.
Okay.
So.
And now I think Senja will give us a Commission perspective on some of these things.
Just to comment shortly, I think that many, many thanks for all the panelists. I think we've heard several very compelling arguments in favor of international cooperation in research and innovation, and also the advantages of being associated to the program. By the way, who would have thought that President Trump is someone to promote our approach? If he really said that we will need EU for the international collaboration to tackle the global challenges, this is exactly what we are doing with our research and innovation program, with the current one and even more so with the next one, Horizon Europe. Now, just to point to a few of them. You said we need to tap on the best brains. That's exactly what we can do via international collaboration. To foster excellence in your area, that's exactly what we are doing. Also, promoting the economic growth. That's what we are doing also in the southeastern Europe, also bringing the Western Balkan countries closer to Europe, preparing them for the accession, which is their aspiration. Also, actually being a leader, becoming a leader in the sixth wave of innovation, which goes beyond digital, and is actually in the areas where we have competitive advantage when it comes to the green technology, when it comes really to the areas that Anita mentioned. So these are really very important, compelling arguments. What I'd like also to highlight, as you know, at least as the Commission has proposed in the new framework program, is to open up the possibility for getting associated to more countries. Now we have the European countries, we have our closest neighbors, but also to open up these possibilities to industrial countries who have the excellent science base, but who also share our values. I know some of them are represented here, also in the audience, also listening carefully, seeing what advantages, what benefits they can get of becoming associated. I think some of these you clearly underlined, and also one of these is also access to these large infrastructures. Then working together with the teams, collaborative teams, which we know actually are much more successful when it comes to the citations, when it comes to the best quality of articles, for instance. And clearly, the major advantage is to find solutions together to the challenges that we are all facing. So just before giving the floor to the audience, I think it was good to capture the main elements from the discussion at this panel so far.
Okay, so now we can take some questions from the floor. Occasionally people make statements from the floor, but I'd prefer if we could have questions. Yeah, so can we have a mic here? Second row. He's got his hand up. Is there someone with a microphone somewhere? You can shout into my mic. Hang on. We don't seem to have. Hang on.
We should have mics.
Well, maybe I could repeat it. Yeah, I could repeat your question.
Okay, the question is Richard Hudson from Science Business.
Yeah.
Simple question. The association discussions are, of course, the senior that you referred to are very important. Can you begin those discussions?
The mic is coming. Just a second. Because we are, well, people can also watch us online, so otherwise they won't
very brief. Richard
be able
Hudson
to
from Science Business.
Here.
Can the association discussions, negotiations with these countries begin before Brexit is resolved?
Yes. Thanks for an easy question. Well, clearly, we can only start the negotiations when we have the stable basis of the regulation. You may know that for the time being, the article related to association has not been agreed by the co-legislators, that is the European Parliament and the Council. Once we have that position, then we can start that. So you can interpret my reply.
Okay, one more over here.
There too. There's a lady up there.
And then one, yeah, okay, and then.
Thank you very much. Patrick Wittefeld. I'm representing a Japanese university in Brussels, Kobe University, which has been committed for more than 10 years in strong cooperation with Europe. We are welcoming, as a university, the prospect of what I called Association 2.0, which is this new type of association. So I had three questions. The first one, Deputy Director General Ratzo already answered in part. The first one would be on the timetable of the joint agreement by Parliament and Council, hopefully. The second, and I think we can all have an educated guess, what are the first countries which are likely to be the first one of the gate? And my third question, listening to panelists today, is with striking examples, especially of the cost for Switzerland of non-association for 6 months, how the beneficiaries of the first wave of association could be enlisted to help convince some, let's say, holdouts in some of the governments the Commission is negotiating with. How can these countries be the best ambassadors? And we are talking from the point of view of Japanese university as a user. So we need all the help we can do. We're quite zen. We don't want to be disappointed, but all the help will be welcome. Thank you.
Well, I'm not quite sure if I was able to catch all your questions. On the timetable, I think I gave the reply. Now, in terms of how you can participate once you are associated, was that what you wanted to ask?
My second question was which countries are likely to be the first one successfully negotiate an accession. And the third country is how best, and this is addressed to the Commission mainly, how can we use the success, the examples of the three examples among others we heard today, to convince countries or part of governments who are maybe not as enthusiastic as they should be. Users like universities are very enthusiastic. Some governments officials are less. So they might need some, let's say, demonstration like what we heard today. But how best to organize this? Maybe an argumentaire, or maybe meetings with top beneficiaries, with ambassadors from, I would call them association ambassadors. Thank you.
Can we move the mic on to the next questioner as well, please? Thank you. Can you give it back to? Thank you.
I try now to reply once the next question. Now who are the first successful countries? Well, clearly in terms, it's related also to the timetable, because it's clear that these countries who are already associated And depending on what kind of agreement there is, it will be clearly easier. If this is, for instance, EAA agreement for Norway, then it's quite straightforward. If these are the candidate countries, then it's also all countries with whom we already have association agreement, then it's an easier process. Now, when speaking about the countries, well, so to say, the new wave of countries to whom we intend to open up the possibilities, then it will also depend on how quickly they can mobilize themselves in order to be ready for the negotiations, which we can really start once we have the regulation agreed, and if the regulation will contain this clause, which I very much hope will be the case. And then also for you, I hope that you just heard some of the arguments also in this panel, which are the ones also in order to convince the policymakers that it would be really advantageous for their participants, whether it's universities or other players, actually to participate in the program as fully associated, which means to be on par with the European beneficiaries. I think that's also something which was not very clearly mentioned, but this is clearly one of the very clear advantages.
Okay, thank you. Can we have the next question?
Hello, my name is Diana Rusu. I'm leading an accelerator in Romania and also representing a network of accelerators, tech startups accelerators in the CE countries. So I have two questions. One connected to accelerators, and how do you see them involved maybe in working with the EIC, because usually we get put it in the same, I don't know, class with the VCs, but it's not always the same story, because what's happening in the accelerator world in Europe is very different from what's happening in the US. So I think that maybe here we can just reinvent how we can play an active role in shaping the innovation ecosystem. And secondly, as part of one of the Eastern European countries, I was also curious how we can be more actively engaged in maybe policy shaping and also bringing the, you know, like the bottom-up perspective from working with startups, and how you can turn maybe ideas or results into actual businesses. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can comment on the accelerators. So the accelerator program, which is now part of EIC, is quite new for EU. But so far, I can speak at least for Norway, because the focus of the accelerator program has been on SMEs, which is, for a small country as Norway, we don't have many large enterprises. We are an SME country, actually, with a focus on the small companies. So for us to have a vehicle in EU that actually the small Norwegian companies can participate in. So what we've been doing in Norway, and specifically at Innovation Norway, we have spent a couple of years, as the first time we heard about Moedas introducing his visions and what he's going to build here in EU, the importance of saying to Norwegian companies that EU is not a bureaucratic, hard, rough process. This is a place where there are low-hanging fruits, where there are connections, where there are capital and relationships that's important for Norwegian businesses and industries if you want to grow. So we train them in how to do elevator pitching for the EU teams. And what we see now is that the return for Norwegian SMEs is now at over 4%, and the Norwegian government expected 2%. This works. But it has to be done a lot of work nationally, at the national country, where you have to kind of sell the program and then have some cases where it actually happens and when they are successful. So the benefit for the Norwegian companies of being part of this EU accelerator program has been very, very positive. If we compare it, like you said, with the accelerator programs in the US, they have years where they have trained on these accelerator programs in the ICT specifically and Silicon Valley. But what EU needs to do is to learn from Silicon Valley, is to learn from Asia, and I mean specifically in China now. When I visited Alibaba, one of the persons there said, so China has a vision. We're going from made in China to invented in China. That sentence brings a clear message to the people and where the focus is going to be. 500 million people in the EU are going to compete with what, 1.4 billion people in China, 4.4 billion in Asia. So what we can do is to learn from the different countries, but EU needs to create our own playbook. We need to learn from what they're doing in Berlin, which is Silicon Alley, what they're doing in Finland, what they're doing in Montenegro, what they're doing in Ireland, what they're doing in the different countries, and then create an accelerator and a footprint and a one-stop shop for European entrepreneurs and innovators. And I think that's the goal, but we are maybe later in the game, EU, when it comes to acceleration on startups and entrepreneurs than the US has been. But I'd say it's not too late, and we're going to do it differently, and we're going to do it in a very, I would say, interesting way, because the European entrepreneurs have the SDGs and sustainability in their backbone. Social entrepreneurship, and I hope and I think what EU will focus on is women. Empowering female entrepreneurship, female investors. We talked a lot about that in the first board meeting, because that Silicon Valley and US and Asia has failed on so far. Well, we can succeed on diversity, because that's the whole value of EU. And then we will play with the other continents in a good way.
Okay, I think we've got time for one last question. Person in red here.
Thank you. My name is Marta Fernandez. I work for an Australian university, one of the Australian technical universities, and Australia is also on the queue to be an associated country to the European Commission. So they already much fund any successful Australian grant on the medical research side. So look forward to see what comes out of that. We haven't talked so much about third countries. So we have a campus in Vietnam, and they're very keen on this European office to be a gateway to Europe for them. So what's the intention on Horizon Europe to increase international cooperation with third countries?
Well, clearly here we focused more on the potential of association, which, by the way, also Australia is looking into. But clearly we will continue then the international cooperation with all countries of the world, clearly based on the shared interest, and in the areas where we can clearly have a better impact together. Whether it's the climate change, whether it's the aging populations, whether all the global challenges that we've been discussing here, which are also part of the missions, so on and so forth. Clearly, we have, Africa as one of the priorities for cooperation, also for research and innovation. Just to mention that in one of the previous sessions, by the way, there were 2 women entrepreneurs from Africa who gave their examples what they have been doing in the energy sector in Africa, actually also providing clean cooking possibilities for Africa, for instance. And also with other countries of the world, whether it's the US, where we continue to cooperate, which is the largest partner, also with China, Asian countries, basically all global players.
Okay. So I think we've reached the point where we should wind up. And I just wanted to say, I think the panel have given us a really rich picture of the benefits of cooperation in terms of the quality of research, the influence on workforce, and the focus on new challenges. And particularly the new priorities are really driving sustainability issues right to the top of the agenda, which I think is extremely important. And how association and other mechanisms are really a rich mechanism for extending the capability of the European research family. So thank you all for your comments, and thank you, the audience, for your participation. Thanks very much.